Hello and welcome to the Freakish Lemon video podcast. I am your host, the Freakish Lemon. I go by Adrian and I use masculine pronouns. Welcome any new viewers to this podcast. Thank you so much for taking a chance and clicking on whatever you clicked on to get here. I hope you enjoy. And welcome back any returning viewers. I really appreciate that you are sticking with this podcast. This is a crafty type podcast coming to you from the Northwest Hills of Connecticut. And if you don't know, the show notes for this episode and all other episodes can be found at freakishlemon.com or freakishlemonpodcast.com. You can join our group on Ravelry. Just search Freakish Lemon in the Groups tab and you will find us. You can follow me personally as Freakish Lemon at all the fun places like Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Ravelry. If I'm there as Freakish Lemon. And all the links to all these places will be in the down bar here on YouTube or somewhere around here if you're watching this somewhere else. If you are here on YouTube and you'd like to follow along with these videos, please hit subscribe down there so that you get an update in your subscription box whenever I post a new video. Today is Sunday, April 30th. Which is when I'm filming this, obviously, because that's today's date. That's what I just said out of my mouth. And yeah, just a quick reminder for podcast stuff that the 2017 Blanket Make-Along, hashtag 2017 Blanket MAL, is ongoing. It goes until the end of 2017, so if you're knitting, crocheting, sewing, weaving, whatever-ing a blanket and you've got photos to show your progress on this blanket project that you're working on at any point this year, please come over to the Ravelry group and submit it into the chatter and encouragement thread and check out some really cool blankets that people are making. Yeah, that was it. I like to start this podcast out with a little bit of life stuff. This past week, 2 weeks, this podcast is every 2 weeks, has been busy work-wise, and the weather's been, for me personally, horrible because it's been getting stupidly warm, and I don't like it. Also, allergy season, which is, yeah, you can tell by how red my eyes are. They're so itchy. But hopefully that'll calm down today because it just rained, so a lot of that stuff should be stuck to the ground instead of floating in the air. But some other life stuff. Quick update on the craft room. As you can see, I'm not in a craft room. I'm still in my bedroom, which you can still see my reflecty lights up there. The room's been measured for the carpet, so in a few weeks we should have space to do things, which will be fun. Maybe not by next episode, but pretty sure by the episode after that we'll start to see some craft room action. So yay, new carpet. Other life stuff, got 3 more bullet points. First is library. Or big book readers in this house, and my personal library has been very poorly kept track of. For the past 10 years, I've been using an online service called Library Thing, librarything.com, which is a great service. At the time when I signed up for it, I primarily had physical books, and as long as I remembered to update my list of books when I got new books, it worked out for me. However, in those past 10-ish years, I've gotten a lot more digital books and a lot more audiobooks. So there wasn't a good way for me using their system without completely overhauling tags or whatever. There wasn't a good way for me to add those books and differentiate them from the rest of my library. And I was also having problems being able to find out which books I had in a series. Unless, you title them with the series in the title or set up your tags in a specific way, it's hard to find out which books you have in a series. And I tend to be a series reader. So last weekend, I took a huge chunk of that weekend and filled out a Google spreadsheet. So it's a pretty simple spreadsheet. It's, the title of the book, the author of the book, series name if it has one, which book number it is in the series if it has one. Something like Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, I just put Discworld and then no numbers because you can kind of read them in any order. But if I had something like Jedi Apprentice, it'd be, the first book in the Jedi Apprentice, title, author, Star Wars Jedi Apprentice, book 1, then the ISBN number and what type of book it is. So I have paperback, hardcover, digital, and audio for my books. I went through as much of my library as I could find. I might have missed a couple of digital books or a couple of audiobooks, depending on what format they were in and where I got them from. But, yeah, I cataloged my own personal library, and apparently I have, if I found them all, 750 books. Super fun. But now I have it in a format that I can easily search for what I need to search it for, which is fantastic. And if you are a book person who has a lot of books and they're not easy to keep track of, I would definitely recommend either looking into Library Thing or putting together something where you can figure out what you have and what you don't have, because I found 4 duplicates that I recently just got by doing this. Ridiculous. And then this past weekend has been very eventful. I went to 2 fiber shows over the past 2 days. On Friday, I went to Stitches United, which is kind of revamped version of Stitches East at the convention center in Hartford, Connecticut. Yeah, it was a good show. It's a little smaller than Stitches East used to be. I don't know if that's just a small start because they're returning or what the deal was, but there was a good selection of vendors there. I had expected more quilting vendors because they had incorporated quilting and sewing into this show, which they don't typically in their other shows. But that was interesting. Definitely worth checking that out. And then yesterday was Connecticut Sheep and Wool, which is out in Vernon, Connecticut. And that's a tiny show. That's always been a tiny show. But that was a good time to go through. A lot of familiar faces there, because we like to go to local New England and Connecticut fiber shows. So you end up seeing some of the same farms there that you see in other places. Starting to recognize us. And Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi and Once Upon a Corgi Handmade, who is my sister, was there vending, and she did really well, and that was very exciting. Yeah, I hung out at that booth for a while, just as extra backup. And it was busy the whole time I was there, so that was good. Good times. And then yesterday was also International Tabletop Day, which is a game for playing tabletop board games, basically. And there's been a resurgence in playing board games over the past few years. Lots of new, exciting, fun games to play. And so I went to my friend's house down in southern Connecticut, and we got together and hung out and played a bunch of games. I'll I think we only played 4 games, but they are super fun. We started out, while people were showing up and coming in, we played 2 kind of shorter card games. The first game we played is called Super Fight, and links to these games' websites will be in my show notes. Super Fight is a fun draw cards game where basically each player, through a series of draws, creates a ridiculous creature, monster, warrior, fighter person with ridiculous attributes. And you argue amongst yourselves who out of the hand would win in a fight. So a lot of times you get really hilarious combinations like Mr. Rogers, but there's 50 of him, and they have no arms, fighting a mermaid who... I don't remember what that one was. A mermaid who had a harpoon gun, but has jellyfish for hands. Like, and lots of characters like that, and you have to determine who's gonna win. Super fun to play that one, and it gets really silly really quickly. And then we played a game which was new to us called Schmovie. That one was hard. It's a game where you take turns playing the judge, and you roll a die to find out a movie genre. So an action movie, a horror movie, a romance, a sci-fi, and then you draw from a card pile a descriptor and a main character, basically. So we had one where it was a singing cannibal, and each of the other players has to come up with a movie title for a movie about a singing cannibal. An action movie about a singing cannibal, for example. That can get really hard. It's fun, but it's a hard, because you're sitting there just like thinking of movie titles. But it is a fun game, and I'm glad we got a chance to play it. And then this tabletop day, because we've been doing this for a few years now, getting together and playing these games. But this year, my friends planned to have a feature game, a longer play game where it's going to take more time to set up and play. But they told us what the game was beforehand and linked to some instructions. And I went looking for playthroughs just to see how the actual rounds of the game go. And it's a game they picked for this year, which is a great game, a game called Mysterium. In this game, you can play 2 to 7 players, which is a great number of players. And the premise is that one person plays a ghost who has a specific job because this ghost has been murdered. And then everybody else is playing psychics who are trying to solve the murder mystery of this ghost. And it's a cooperative game, so you work with each other to try to figure this out. And the ghost can't talk during the game. They can only hand you visions per turn. You have to find out which suspect out of a group of suspects. And once you figure that out for each, for your character, you find out which location in the big haunted house and with what. So it's kind of like cooperative Clue. But the vision cards are these surreal paintings. So you have to try to guess what this could be referring to when it's like a painting of... I had one where in the foreground there was a broom, and the rest of it was the sea, and there was a boat and a bottle, and there was like streamers in the wind. You get some really surreal picture cards, and the ghost has a set hand of how many of cards to choose from, so it could be like the closest they could possibly get to the thing, but it's very interpretive. It's a really, really fun game. And then after that, later, after we had food and hung out for a while. We played a round of Exploding Kittens, which is a fun game where you basically have to avoid exploding kittens. And it's a card game, drawing cards and playing them based on what it says on the card. It's super fun game, but Mysterium was really good, and it was really cool to do a tabletop game day where we had one major game that took might have taken longer than an hour. I'd say an hour to 2 hours. Because we did a lot of deliberating. So that was a lot of fun. That's pretty much it for life stuff. That's all the exciting bits anyway. So we're going to move on to the actual crafting. And frankly, there's not much this week. But we'll talk about it. We'll start and end with knitting stuff. Because I haven't really done much crochet. I've done a little bit of crochet, but not enough to really show any progress. And I did a teeny bit of quilting, but it was 1 square of my Halloween quilt, so that's not worth showing at this point. And a little bit of spinning on the brown cormo for the brown cormo sweater, but again, not enough to really show anything. So the only actual crafting is going to be knitting. I have one finished object for knitting. I finished my Ray Grand Central socks. This is the Grand Central socks pattern from the New York City sock collection from Mina Phillip of the Knitting Expat podcast. Lovely textured pattern. And this is in Junk Yarn's smooth sock base in the Ray colorway. And that base is 75-25 merino nylon. I knit these on US zeros, 2 millimeters. This is just some Knit Pick Stroll fingering in this kind of orange, which mostly goes with these little orange flecks in the yarn. The orange flecks in the yarn are not picking up on this camera very well, but they are a similar color. And I did the Smooth Operator Socks heel by Susan B. Anderson because I love that heel. So yeah, these are done. These are very exciting. This is the 3rd pair of socks for my Box O Socks, which is a year-long knit-along being hosted by Kristen of the Yarngasm podcast and Volavine Yarns. And the goal of that is to knit 12 socks by the end of the year. Yeah, I'm very happy with these socks. But I am glad to have them off the needles. As much as I love textured socks, they do slow me down, and I am behind. It's April, and I've only got 3 pairs of socks for my box of socks. So, not going to do textured socks for a little while, at least until I catch up to the month and the pair of socks that should be if you're going to be doing 1 pair of socks per month. But they are done, and that's very exciting. I've been putting a lot of work into the Find Your Fade shawl by Andrea Mowry. I'm knitting this on US 3s, 3.25 millimeter needles, and hold this up. This peanut butter and jelly sandwich progress keeper is where I was last time I showed this to you. This is my indicator of which side's the front side. So I've completed this color garter and the lace. Even though I messed up the lace, you can see this side is good, this side's a little wonky. I don't know why this side is a little wonky. Probably didn't have the right amount of stitches. But yeah, it's just not quite right. And I don't know why that is. But I'm not going to worry about it. So I finished that, did a little bit of garter up here, and then I'm into the color meld section with the next color. So, reminder that colors 1, 2, and 3 are from Once Upon a Corgi, Handmaids, A Series of Unfortunate Events club colorways. I just finished up Legacy Fiber Arts Sweater Weather, and now I'm blending in Volenvine Yarns' Moon Cusser, which looks like this in the cake. So starting to get into the purpley range, which is very exciting. And this has been flying by because I'm in the section of the shawl. It's a paid-for pattern, but a lot of people have been knitting this shawl. But you get to a point in the shawl where you no longer increase the stitches, and that's where I've been. So I'm flying through, you know, these colors now and putting a lot of time into them. So that's very, very exciting because I do want to finish this because I want to throw it on. It looks so fun to just throw on because it's so giant. I can't wait to see how giant it is. So, making progress on that. And I've got 2 new cast-ons since last episode. Which one first? Socks. Cast on a pair of vanilla socks for work. And I'm back to my Mustache Yarns self-striping socks. So I've started my Anakin Skywalker socks. I'm knitting them concurrently, as you can see. I find, especially if I have 2 50-gram cakes, that casting them both on is really helpful to me because then I have the same gauge for the cast on. Because I do find when I do one after another, my gauge for the second cast on changes a little bit. But so what I do is I cast on my 64 stitches for my sock on DPNs, knit 3 rounds of 2x2 rib, and then I cast on the second one on another set of DPNs, 64 stitches, knit 3 rounds of 2x2 rib, and then decide which one I'm going to start actually doing. With these self-stripings, it's really easy to get a length of the cuff that I like because I just go to when a color change happens and I'm like, oh, that looks about right. And I just do the same thing on the other one. I knit all of the stockinette for this one yesterday at tabletop day, and I've been working on this one steadily at work for about a week. So that's exciting. These ones I'm going to do into tubes, finish them off with a toe, and then cut in the heel later because I do really like how quickly that method of making socks goes. So that's very exciting. And that's where I am on this pair of socks. And then I cast on this project partially to have another small project on the needles, and partially because this was taking up too much space in my tiny corner of the craft room. A couple years ago at the Western Connecticut Yarn Council Fiber Friends Yarn Crawl, I won a kit. I won a copy of Barocco Tuscan Tweed number 380 and 2 balls of Barocco Tuscan Tweed, which is, it looks like this. And it is a blend of 65% wool, 25% viscose, and 10% mohair. And this is color imaginatively named 9034. But it's like a gray-blue tweedy color. And there came with enough to make a hat called the Witch Hazel Hat by Amy Christoffers. Oh goodness, there's not enough elbow room. I've wedged myself in here. So, it's a paid for pattern, but it's a cable hat. And it takes, theoretically, 2 balls of this Tuscan tweed. So I started making this hat. And then I forgot how slowly I do cables when I'm stabbing myself with my Hiya sharps. So I started this hat on US 4s, 3.5 millimeter, 16-inch needles. And then for when you go up the needle size, I went to a US 6, 4 millimeter needle. And these are so sharp. I normally do cables without a cable needle, but the way I manipulate my stitches, I end up stabbing the tips of my fingers with these needles because they're so sharp. But I have retrieved a cable needle back from Gabby, who borrowed one a while back, so hopefully I'll make quicker progress with the cable needle, so I'm not just spending so much time trying to avoid stabbing my fingers with these cables. And they're not difficult cables. They're actually pretty intuitive once you get going into the pattern repeat. But there's no chart in this booklet. So I think that's also slowing me down a little bit because I'm used to working cables from charts. I don't know. But I'm very excited that I'll have this hat because I am really liking how this yarn is knitting up. It will be very warm come winter time, and I'm starting to feel more into cables than I was kind of burnt out on cables for a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm losing track of what I'm saying. I'm distracted by how itchy my eyeballs are. But yeah, no project bag for this, just in this plastic thing, so I can empty the plastic thing, basically. And then I can file that little booklet away, and I'll have a finished hat, and that'll be good. And that's the extent of my knitting stuff. So now, since I don't have any other crafts to show you at the moment, we'll move on to new stuff. And I do have some new stuff because I went to 2 fiber festivals. But I'm very proud of what I got because I really stuck to what I planned, which is great. I mean, there was a couple little extras from Stitches, but generally stuck to the plan, and I came in under budget, so yes. So first I'll show you what I got at Stitches United. This first purchase I was extremely pleased by. Erin Lane Bags was there at Stitches United, and gotta love Erin Lane Bags. They do wonderful, beautiful bags, and the craftsmanship of the bags is amazing. I don't know how new these are. I remember some of the basic ones, like the plain ones previously, but it's a custom designed fabric called Sheeple, and it's these drawings of sheep doing fun and interesting things. And at the show this past weekend, she had a whole bunch of nerdy sheeple. She had Doctor Who sheeple, she had Harry Potter sheeple, and of course she had some Star Wars sheeple. So I got a drawstring bag with some Star Wars sheeple. So we've got like a Vader sheeple, we've got a gold bikini Leia sheeple, we've got a sheep knitting with lightsabers, we've got a stormtrooper sheeple, just a regular sheeple, we got some BB-8 yarn thingy. Here we go. Here's an X-Wing pilot knitting. Had to get it. It was Star Wars and sheep. So that's everything I love in the universe, basically. And this is just plain lining. She did have some with sheeple lining too, so it would have like just like the outlines of the sheeple not fully colored the way these are. which were really cool. But I got this sheeple bag, and I think I've never seen this previously at the Erin Lane booth, but I think because it was Stitches United and joining with quilting and sewing, she also had fabric there. She had 1 yard cuts of fabric, which I bought too, which I'll show you, but she also had just a table with scraps. And so you'd grab a bunch of scraps. The lowest you could do was 1/4 pound, but I think it was $15 for a pound of scraps, which is a great deal, and you could get some really cool fabrics that way. And since it's a quilt show, lots of people were grabbing scrap fabric. But I went for some 1 yard cuts because she had some Star Wars fabric there. So I got a 1 yard cut of this Rey fabric, which is fantastic. And I got a 1 yard cut of this X-Wing fabric. That's actually upside down. But yeah, this great fabric. And it was 2 for $20. So, I mean, for Star Wars print fabrics, it's actually not bad. I don't know if these are custom fabrics or if these are fabrics you can find elsewhere, but I know that Star Wars print fabrics, if you don't have coupons for places or whatever, they can get a little pricey. But these are great fabrics, and that was really cool that I could pick them up from the Erin Lane booth because, you know, good times. Really cool to support small business while also getting Star Wars fabric. And then we went to at the shows, we do a full round and then we choose where to go back to next to buy things. So when I went back on my round to go buy things, after Erin Lane, I went to the Into the World booth because you can't not go to the Into the World booth and buy something. So I bought a braid of fiber. This is a Corriedale braid, and the colorway is Spinner's End. And this is going towards my blended fiber dark sweater spin after my Cormo sweater spin. Lots of dark blues and purples, and this one will be fun because it's got this kind of deep brown and a little bit of green. So that'll be fun. Frankly, the majority of the fiber that I've been gathering for this project has been Into the World, so most of those colors should go together very, very well. But this is lovely. So I was very excited to pick that up. And that had been a plan of mine. And then this wasn't planned, but it's a great find. One of the vendors there, sorry, hurt my shoulder, so it made a weird noise. Don't know what I did, but I hurt something, like, in my shoulder blade this weekend at some point. So it hurts when I move. Yeah, but it's one of the quilt shop booths that we went into. It was the Sew-inspired quilt shop in Simsbury, Connecticut. They had kits and stuff available for sale, and, you know, just fabric that you could buy. But some of the samples they had out were like tote bags and things. So I picked up this bag and I opened it up and I was like, this is magical. And they had the pattern for sale, so I got the pattern. This is the Maker's Tote by Noodlehead. And that's these beautiful tote bags. You can see there's a pocket on the front. And then I don't know how much you'll be able to see from these pictures, but there's 3 interior pockets on one side. And on the other side, there's a zipper pocket inside, and there's a zipper pocket on the back on the outside. So, and it was, I think the bigger one was the one that they had made to show for example, but you could easily fit a sweater project in there. Maybe not the biggest sweater project in the world, but you could definitely fit a large sweater project in there. And because the way the zipper is, because it's like a separating jacket zipper, you can just unzip it all the way, and then have it out almost like a basket. It was very sturdy structure for a tote bag. And I've gained some confidence after making that gray duffel bag. So I'm very excited that at some point I'm going to be making this, and I think I'm going to be using my Star Wars yard cuts for this project. So that will be really, really cool. At least some of them. Maybe make 2 bags. Who knows? But yeah, that would be super fun to do. So I got this pattern at that booth. Oops. Just throw it. Just throw it on the ground. And then, of course, we all... No, I don't think Gabby purchased from this booth, but it's like obligatory that we purchase from this booth when we see them, because they're the ones who really introduced us to this whole fiber world, because they were the first booth we went to at the first fiber show we went to. And that is our friends over at 100 Ravens. They dye beautiful yarn, lots of nerdy type themed yarn, and every year they develop new colorways on a theme. So last year they had a pirate theme. The year that we met them, they had a Lord of the Rings theme. One year they did a Wizard of Oz theme. This year their theme is dragons. And I love dragons. There's a dragon back there. You can't see too many other dragons from this side, but I love dragons. I love them. And this colorway screamed at me. So I had to get it. I bought it on their Yakko Space, which is 100% merino wool. And this, which is coming up a little bit lighter than it is in real life, is dragon heartstrings. Look at this color. Like, again, it's a little bit darker in real life. The light is kind of brightening it up a bit. It's more of like shadows of this tone. But look at that. Dragon heartstrings. I was very tempted, but I know I'll see them later in the year. They also have a colorway called Night Fury, which is amazing. My mom bought the colorway Luck Dragon, which is the perfect Falcor colorway you've ever seen in your life. It's almost pearlescent. It's that kind of white with those little, the slightest hint of pink, purples, and blues in that pearlescent kind of way. It's amazing. I don't know what I would personally do with it, which is why I didn't pick one up, but it's amazing. Link to their shop is in the show notes. And they have lots of amazing colorways, but I just could not stand how amazing Dragon Heartstrings was. So, and that's the end of the haul. By that tally, 1 braid of fiber, 1 skein of yarn, 1 bag, 1 pattern, 2 cuts of fabric. That's a pretty good haul. That's a reasonable haul. I'm very proud of myself. And then I have a small haul from the Connecticut Sheep and Wool Festival. I knew exactly what I was getting when I went to that festival. Well, 2 things. I knew exactly what I was getting. 1 thing, I knew I was getting something from that booth, but it depended on what she had available. So, small haul from that. It's a small show, but I stuck to my budget on that one too, which is very exciting. So the first booth I bought from was Alpaca Obsession. If you've been a longtime viewer of the podcast, you've seen stuff from Alpaca Obsession before. They're a local alpaca farm. This is a natural black alpaca. I got 2 of these. And these are going towards a hand-spun project that I've been accumulating things for to make use of all my little bits of alpaca hand-spun from when I first started spinning. So it's a lot of unevenly spun worsted to Aran weight-ish alpaca handspun. But I needed some more dark colors for contrast, so I got 2 things. They're not really braids, they're just kind of bundles of alpaca fiber. And that will be the last of the acquisitions for that particular project of alpaca fiber. Which is very exciting, which means once I finish spinning all of it, I can cast it on. Which is super exciting. And then I went to a booth by Cut Wrinkles. Cut Wrinkles is a notions and accessories booth. Everything pretty much is made out of wood. She does really great buttons and stitch markers and tools to use. So I'd previously gotten a needle gauge from her, a great needle gauge because it went below 0. So it went to double zeros, triple zeros, quadruple zeros, and I think quintuple zeros. Because I have needles in those sizes, but I don't know which ones are which. And then I remembered that she also has these handy things. This is a knitter's rule. She also has a crocheter's rule, but I'm going to be using this more for knitting, so I got a knitter's rule. This is a tool to measure a gauge swatch. 4 inches by the same amount of, equivalent centimeters. So you can just frame out your swatch, count your stitches. So I got one of these, and then also, because I couldn't resist, I got a wraps print guide that's a corgi. Oh, I needed it. It was a corgi. So, of course, I got that. And then I went to the Stitched by Jessalou booth. She does project bags, and she's been doing a lot of custom fabric project bags recently. And this year's custom fabric, I had to get it. I was aiming to get a spindle bag, but I'm going to use this bag as a spindle bag for my smaller, like my little Turkish spindles and my smaller spindles. But I saw this fabric in person and I had to get this bag. So this year she custom made Middle-earth map fabric. I've got dog hair all over this already. Like, this is the map of Middle-earth. Like, here's Eriador. And the Shire's over there. You go down, here's Mordor. Here's Rohan, Gondor, dog hair. So it's just a small wedge bag, but for using my little Turkish spindles and, say, Rolags, this is the perfect size. And she does amazing lining fabric to go with it. So here's the map of Middle-earth, and here's the interior fabric. That's amazing. That's perfect. So I had to. So this is going to be my small spinning project bag. I didn't get handles. She did have handles for sale at this show. I think that was a new thing. I didn't grab one because there was none that went with this left. But maybe in the future I'll grab one or I'll make one. So yeah, but that's just beautiful custom fabric. It's beautiful. And she makes beautiful bags. So, designated tiny spinning bag. And that is the end of my haul for the weekend. Yay! Yeah, that's it. So we're going to move on to other stuff. And primarily in other stuff, we're going to talk about more fiction podcasts that I've been listening to, because that's really what I've been focusing on completely. So the first podcast I'm going to talk about is a podcast called Archive 81. The tagline for this is a podcast about horror, cities, and the subconscious. This is a podcast that's done in seasons, the way you do a TV show. So, season 1 and season 2 are very different. I was a little bit jarred by the change. Season 1 is a suspense season. About a guy who's working in this Archive 81 by listening to tapes and archiving them. And the tapes get creepier and creepier as you go along the season, and then things take a very weird turn going into season 2. It's a lot more surreal, a lot more kind of Lovecraftian horror. There is some body horror. I didn't find it to be too terrible because it was mostly audio and not like gross audio sounds past the first episode-ish. So that was fine for me. But if the idea of body horror really creeps you out, then I would stay away from this one. But I'm enjoying it. I want to see where it goes. It's very surreal, very kind of creepy and weird. And a bit of a mystery. So that's super interesting. And then I listened to Alba Salik's Royal Physician. Here's a summary for that podcast. Farloria's royal physician has her work cut out for her. As head witch and the only regular staff member at the new House of Healing, Alba's got an endless lineup of patients and a bickering king and queen to please. Fortunately, help is on the way. Unfortunately, that help is from Magnus, a troublesome young ex-monk and aspiring surgeon, and Holly, an accident-prone fairy herbalist. It's a comedy podcast, and it's a fantasy world, but it's a very modern take on a fantasy world. Like in the first episode, when Centaur comes into the Halls of Healing, he finds out that chiropractic isn't covered under his insurance because he's got 2 spines. Because he's got the human back and the horse back, and insurance doesn't cover both. It's very funny, and it's got another podcast on that feed called The Axe and Crown, which is about a tavern run by a troll in like the bad part of town. It's really, really funny, and if you like, fantasy and comedy, definitely worth a listen. And then I just finished the other day the Magnus Archive. And here's a summary for that one. The Magnus Archives is a weekly horror fiction anthology podcast examining what lurks in the archives of the Magnus Institute, an organization dedicated to researching the esoteric and the weird. Join the new head archivist, Jonathan Sims, as he attempts to bring a seemingly neglected collection of supernatural statements up to date, converting them to audio and supplementing them with follow-up work from his small but dedicated team. Individually, they are unsettling. Together, they begin to form a picture that is truly horrifying because as he looks into the depths of the archives, something starts to look back. It's getting real suspenseful. The first, I'd say, 10 to 12 episodes seem a little bit slow going because they don't appear to be connected. And it just sounds like one guy reading a statement, and then when you're listening to them back to back, just reading a bunch of statements. But as you progress through the podcast, they become more and more connected, and things get weirder and weirder and creepier, and I'm really enjoying it. It's like a slow burn Lovecraftian discovery thing where like you're starting to see how it all ties together in the supernatural weirdness. super great. I definitely recommend that one. If you like creepy horror, yeah, creepy horror and mysteries, because you're trying to put together, like, oh, this name sounds familiar, but I don't know why, and then the archivist will make a connection, like, oh, is this person related to this person who did this creepy thing? It's really cool. I really like that one. And then I started listening to, I'm about halfway through, the Lesser Gods podcast. And their tagline is, Lesser Gods is a soundscaped, shifting perspective murder mystery podcast. This is an interesting sci-fi type podcast. It's sci-fi in that it's in the future, when the human race gets to a point where they can no longer reproduce. So the human race is slowly dying out. They've been trying experiments and like genetically altering what offspring they can create through medical science to try to fix this problem. And the characters that we're following are the last humans to be born. There's only a handful of them, and they were born in a lab. And since there's only a few of them, the generation previous were named after Greek gods and goddesses. So this last generation, which is very small, they didn't choose a new group of names. They just kept going with Greek gods and goddesses, but they moved on to the lesser gods because they ran out of major gods and goddesses names. And one of them is murdered, which is the biggest outcry scandal ever because they're the last hope for humanity. They're in their early 20s when this podcast is taking place, trying to figure out how they fit in this world that they're not really a part of because they've been medical experiments their whole lives, but they do have their own lives. And they're hitting that point where they're like, well, what's the point? We haven't found anything that works yet. The human race is dying. Why are we even bothering anymore? So it's really, really interesting. And I'm excited to see where that story goes. Especially trying to figure out who murdered one of these kids, you know? It's very interesting. I haven't been really reading any books because I've been all audio podcast and turning my brain off the past couple of weeks. I have been watching a few things that have come back to TV. The new season of Doctor Who started up. I really like Bill, the new companion. She is fantastic. I really, really like... She's really fun and kind of... She reminds me of Rose in that she's, you know, kind of not really sure what she's doing with her life. She's just in a job to be in a job. But she kind of wants something different and she'd like to go on an adventure. But she's more fun than I think what Rose was like. Like Rose had her moments, but Billy's really fun. Or Bill. Not Billy. Bill. She's really fun. And I really like her interaction with Peter Capaldi's doctor. Yeah. Really liking it so far. I haven't watched last night's episode yet, but the 2 episodes that I have seen, I'm really liking. And then the 3 of the CW DC Comics shows are back. So Supergirl, Flash, and Arrow are back. Yeah. I mean, those shows, you know, they kind of go along the way they've been going along. And I'm enjoying them. And that's really all I've been watching. Yep. So I do have a fanfic recommendation for this week. It's a fic called Of Queens, Knights, and Pawns by Chance Kraz. It's a Star Wars time travel fic. Surprise! But different character goes time traveling this time. So the summary of the fic is, I went to sleep on the worst day of my life and woke up to find myself in the past on the second worst day of my life. As experiences go, I don't recommend it. The summary makes it seem like it's a first-person fic. It's not a first-person fic. I don't particularly like first-person fics, so I tend not to read them. It is a third-person limited perspective, so it's mostly following this one character who has time traveled. But it is in the third person. This is General Leia Organa. She goes to bed the day her husband, Han Solo, is killed, murdered by their son. So she goes to bed during The Force Awakens, and she wakes up as her 19-year-old self in the cargo hold of the Imperial ship that's bringing her to her cell on the Death Star. On the Death Star. So, once she figures out this is real, and that she's on the freaking Death Star, she starts to change things. And it's really interesting the way she's going about it, because I love the characterization of Leia in this fic. This is battle-hardened, ruthlessly practical General Leia Organa. So, like, the first thing she does is, I don't know how to describe this. Basically, throw Darth Vader off his groove. Because Darth Vader is expecting to, march into this room, threaten her, torture her, do whatever, he had originally done in the original trilogy to get her to reveal where the rebel base is, which she will never do. And she basically immediately confuses him and cuts that off at the start. And sort of, kind of, breaks through his shields a little bit. Because, Darth Vader kind of has nothing left to live for. So he's very closed off and just kind of single-minded. This is the thing I am doing because Sidious is telling me to do this thing. And he only really breaks that when Luke kind of gets through those shields and kind of appeals to the person that he was. So Leia's doing the same thing, but, ruthlessly. Because she does not like him. She has no fondness in her heart for who he could have been, the way Luke does, because Luke's an optimist, and I'd say she's probably also an optimist too, but she's a very practical optimist. So she's just gonna confuse him, get under his skin, kind of throw him off, and see if she can maybe stop the destruction of Alderaan. And her kind of having to navigate the changes that she's making, not knowing the repercussions that it's going to have on the galaxy, because she's very aware of how consequences of these days have rippled into the future. Watching her kind of plan and navigate and just kind of get through these events is really, really fascinating. And I'm absolutely loving the characterization of Leia herself, and also getting to see an exploration of her relationship with her parents, who don't die. Seeing what that relationship was like at the age that she's supposed to be during A New Hope, and also her getting to learn how their relationship is going to change now that she is not that same person that she used to be. Something that she never had the chance because they died on Alderaan. and her getting to explore her relationship with Luke as her brother from the get-go. There's a conversation between her and Ben Kenobi, which is spectacular, about why they were not told that they're siblings. It's really great. It is an ongoing fic, but I love this portrayal of General Leia and who she is and how she has to wedge herself into her life before. It's really, really good. And that's gonna do it for this podcast episode. So, remember that show notes and links and everything are over at freakishlemon.com and freakishlemonpodcast.com for this episode and all previous episodes if you want to go check those out too. You can join us at the Ravelry group. Just search Freakish Lemon in the groups tab and you will find us. Come join in on the blanket make-along. It's super fun. You can follow me at all the fun places like Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram and Ravelry as Freakish Lemon. If I'm there, I am there as Freakish Lemon. And the links to all these places will be in the down bar here below on YouTube or somewhere around here if you're watching this somewhere else. And if you'd like to, subscribe here on YouTube so you know when I update these podcasts. And that is going to do it for this episode. There was a lot of talking and not a lot of crafts, so hopefully I didn't bore you too much, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in about 2 weeks. Goodbye.